I would say anybody who thinks that Goodfellas is glamorizing the mob, I would say it's the same thing as only watching the first Titanic VHS, and it's a 2-box set.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so,
Wow, this is going pretty well, this voyage, you know? Yeah.
great trip.
Okay, welcome.
It's your episode.
It's my episode. It's another pop culture guest episode. Everyone's favorite.
Is this how we're starting?
This is how we're starting.
Oh, I'm Dan O'Sullivan.
I'm Alana Hope Levinson.
I'm Allie Kahan.
So this episode, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite movies. One of the best movies of all time, let's be real.
Goodfellas.
And we have content manager at Headgum, Allie Kahan, here to discuss because it's also one of her favorite movies.
It's true. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Okay. So those of you who don't know Allie, she is the content manager at Headgum. She is running shit.
How could you not know her?
Allie produces podcasts like Best Friends with Nicole Byer and Sashir Zamita and Seek Treatment with Kat Cohen and Pat Reagan. Mm-hmm. Just two of her amazing production
So she's
situations.
slumming it with us today.
She really is.
Really?
No. I'm so excited to be here.
But we have to talk about why you're here, other than just,
We wanted
hot,
you to be
personality,
here. Yeah.
body is tea, like all of these things. That's why you're here. Genius. Sorry, that was the last one.
I don't get this. I feel like we're moving apart, not just because I'm in the cuck chair again today.
Okay.
But,
There's a fracture.
that was dramatic.
Allie told us very early on in our relationship that she was obsessed with Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
The movie, had read the book Wise Guys by Nicholas Pileggi.
Wise guy, singular.
Ugh, stop.
It's okay. I should have said something.
Wise Guy. This is a fracture. And I need to know, first, let's just start off by saying, why does a 31-year-old lesbian living in LA, such as yourself, love Goodfellas? Which...
Allie, I'll take this one.
Hold on.
I got this. Yeah.
I also love it. Okay, so I'm just saying, but the stereotype of this movie, which we'll touch on later, is that it's a bro movie. Mm-hmm. So tell me about the first time you watched it and what you love about it.
I mean, I love mob movies. They're so good. Goodfellas is a perfect film. There's just no denying it. And I love when I meet other women who also love mob movies and we get to talk about all that stuff because, there is such a reputation of it just feels very like bro in the pop culture canon conversation, but it is a movie for everybody. And
did you hear that, Reddit? Did you hear that?
I love it. And my dad is a big Goodfellas fan. So he was the one who showed me Goodfellas, Godfather. We watched The Godfather together every Christmas. And so I don't remember the first time I watched Goodfellas, but it's just always been around.
I've always been interested in especially like Chicago mafia stuff when I was little. And so that it makes me think of my dad. Love it.
Yeah.
So what about mob movies particularly? Like if you could hone in on what makes them so compelling to you.
I mean, something about it that's really interesting to me is like the toxic masculinity of it all and almost how like they're all posturing so hard and peacocking in such an insulated community where they feel like they have to keep doubling down on this thing and they're all ignoring this, like the 80% of all of their brains that have other thoughts or emotions or feelings. And they're all pretending collectively that doesn't exist and it's all just this. And I just find it fascinating. And I love reading about mafia downfalls. I love getting to the moment where someone screws up and they take their eye off the ball. They're not playing Survivor anymore. It's so fun.
It is really fun.
Well, and this speaks to something I've long felt, right? That mob content, even when we were pitching this show, like to get this show made, like having to say to people, everyone told us women wouldn't be interested in mob stories. And us saying, I think not only is that not true, but it right now, the conception of it is so gendered that men love mob stories, but men love like mob porn. That's what they love. They love these rats, FBI informants on YouTube, that sort of thing. I think women love The Sopranos. Women, our age and younger.
I think that Goodfellas, if you're not into mob movies for whatever reason, or you think you're not, Goodfellas is the perfect one to start with because it really transcends just being a mob movie. And I mean, you could just the fashion alone is so captivating. I mean, there's a million different things to love about it outside of it being a mob movie.
Yeah.
Let's just have a little fun right now and talk about some of our favorite parts.
Okay.
Because
and if you've never seen it, I'm not going to say turn off this podcast and go watch it because that's against my self-interest, right? But after this podcast is over, go watch it. I mean, or rewatch it. If it's on, I'll watch it a million times.
I don't want to put our amazing producer on the spot here, but I think maybe CJ has not seen it and will not listen to my demand.
CJ, is this true?
I'm tenting my fingers in a very mob-like way.
It didn't come up. It just never came up.
It never came. Okay. You know what? It's coming up now, folks. It's coming up now.
And it looks like a second fracture has hit the podcast. But if I had to pick a favorite scene, I would have to say the scene where Henry brings Karen into the Copa nightclub. And there's and he's a god. He's like the coolest guy in the place because they're going in the back entrance. And
that's referred to as the Copacabana tracking shot, because it's done in one long shot to kind of show how she's being seduced into this world, which it works, baby. Cinematography works.
Took 12 hours to do with the DP Michael Bauhaus. And the funny part was it ends with them seated and the great comedian Henny Youngman gets on stage to do a joke. And they did it, I believe, multiple times. And Henny Youngman kept forgetting his line. And they'd have to do it all over again. So the very last guy would fuck it up and they'd have to do it all over again. So it took all night. But anyway, Allie, what are some of your favorite scenes from Goodfellas?
Rewatching it again was so fun. The one that I forgot about that really stuck with me on this last rewatch was the scene where Lorraine Bracco is hanging out with the other mob wives.
That's same.
And because that was also one of my favorite parts of the book too, because it's really sad.
Yeah.
And the glamour is gone and it's fluorescent. It's like they turn on the fluorescent overhead lights and everything looks really, really, really bad. And it's just like, and reading about the way that this lifestyle, if you want to call it that, was affecting like even like these women's skin, their eyes, their energy, what they're able to talk about with each other, and that they really can only hang out with this specific group of people. And like because otherwise they could get killed by accidentally saying something they shouldn't. I was like transfixed by that. I was really, and I know, and this is, I guess, me bringing maybe a more feminine energy point of view on it, where I was just really like, whoa, like the way that being in the mafia would affect your skincare. Having that like...
No snail mucin happening.
No.
I mean, we talked about May Capone's hair went prematurely white and gray as she started dyeing it in her 30s,
So stressful.
Yeah.
And what's amazing about that scene too is it provides it foreshadows what she becomes. In that scene, I noticed she probably looks the most beautiful she's ever looked. I think they do that on purpose, like so classy with the updo. And then by the end, I mean, she's hysterical. It's like she's one of them. So
what's your favorite scene?
Oh my God. Okay. I don't think I have a favorite scene. I'm going to go through my list. Okay. I love the voiceover.
Yeah.
I just think that that's such an amazing part of the movie.
Well, and Ray Liotta. So we get two people who are entitled to do voiceover in it, right? Ray Liotta.
May he rest.
May he rest.
Oh.
King.
I love him.
Should have been in like a million more movies also.
I agree.
Such a great actor. And he has that great voice. He has that I can't do it, but like he has that very unique voice.
Yeah.
And Lorraine Bracco being the other person who I love when she gets introduced and then she starts speaking too,
Oh
right?
my God, yeah.
She's the only other person who gets the voiceover in it. So obviously, yes, the Ray Liotta. And
Yeah.
it sounds like a guy telling you a story in a way that's feels like a guy you meet on the street telling you that. You
Yeah.
know?
So one thing that struck me this time watching it was right in the beginning. I love that they start with his childhood because I think that really sets up the psychology of how the mob works of targeting these poor kids. And this is their way out. But he says, to me, being a gangster was better than being president of the United States. That really hits in 2025 because why not both? You know?
Why not both? .gif.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I would say that I love the fuck you pay me. That's incredible.
The bust out.
The Maury's Wigs commercial.
Real guy.
That character in general is like one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chuck Lowe, the guy who plays him, I think he was like an accountant or agent or something for Robert De Niro, and he suggested, he should play him. He was like not an actor, and he's great in it. You know, it's so cool. But
the last thing I'll say, again, not a scene, but the fashion in this movie is maybe some of my favorite costume design of all time. The Richard Bruno, also R.I.P., worked on all of De Niro, worked on all of Marty's. By the way, he's Marty. I'm like in the studio. Marty's movies. And what's interesting is seeing all the different eras as the movie progresses, but also how they use to get really, but how they're using costumes to build characters. Like you'll notice that Joe Pesci always dresses more formal and sort of outdated.
The collars.
Because he refuses to sort of modernize and he's stuck in the past. That's brilliant to me. Yes, those pointy collars were actually not, when you watch it,
I think of them as very old-fashioned Italian.
They are. It's not a period-specific film with the fashion. They're kind of doing interesting things like that. Like that collar, Marty grew up seeing that collar and he's like, I need that collar. And it's actually in a lot of his films. But I mean, when it becomes 1980, I can't. The set design, the house
that Cocaine buys that they get after he comes out of prison,
literally insane.
There's a beautiful camera move of showing where Henry is touring the new house now that he's a cocaine dealer, where the camera movement is like a physical sport, and the way it shifts in and out of focus to show the TV behind the wall that opens by remote control. Everything you need to know from this, right? So, Allie, so you have fond memories of this, right? Like related to your, watching it with your dad. That's the way I feel about it too. But we'll get into what the story is for those who don't know. It's Henry Hill, gangster who becomes a snitch. That's the long and short of it, right? But I'm wondering, a complaint I've always had is when people say two things. One is that Goodfellas glamorizes the mob. And I'd love to hear both your thoughts on that because I have some thoughts on that. And also, when people say that Scorsese in particular is not, I think he's actually very good with women and has very interesting approaches to depicting women. But he is often classed as somehow a misogynist or something. I wonder if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Totally. I do want to...
You take that one. Woman number one, take that.
I would say anybody who thinks that Goodfellas is glamorizing the mob, I would say it's the same thing as only watching the first Titanic VHS and it's a 2-box set.
Yeah. Wow, this is going pretty well, this voyage, Yeah.
Great trip.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel. It gets so fucked up at the end. So, and flushing $60,000 worth of cocaine down the toilet and getting all these people involved and everybody's physically and mentally tweaking out to the highest degree, and the stress of almost being killed by your friends and your self-made family. It's horrible. There's nothing glamorous about it. I think if anything, it's a very beautiful portrayal at the seduction of the mafia life. And then you find out what it really is, which is terror and stress and tragedy and violence. And, you can't you can get rich quick, but it's very hard to stay rich and then also enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like you can get all these things, but it's like there's an absence of being able to live the way that you actually would because you can't, because then you'd get caught.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. So that's kind of what I would have to say about that. And then last year, I helped produce a season of Newcomers, which is this film podcast on Headgum with Nicole Byer and Lauren Lapkus. And we did a whole Martin Scorsese season, which was so much fun for me. And so I watched a ton of his movies last year for work. And I thought that the way that he wrote women was like very... I liked all of the way he depicted women and his characters. I feel like that each individual, of course, there could always be more. I would say put more. But for, the one really amazing female lead in each movie, I felt like she was developed. I felt like he was behind her and supporting her. And we were with her in the moments where things flew out of control and got violent or scary.
Right.
Or like I'm thinking about in Raging Bull when like they come in during that one scene and it's like Kathy Moriarty. Yeah, it's like it's so scary. Different movie. But even just the same with Lorraine Bracco, where Lorraine Bracco is like walking down the street after Jimmy tells her that she can get some dresses. Yeah. And it's like, and then you're with her down the street. It's so scary. And then she peers in when he's finally like there. And it's just a shadowy hallway with like, you can only see the outline of two big men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think that he did such a beautiful job of being able to visually explain the treacherous, ominous feeling that we have when we are in a doorway like that.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I think he got it.
That's the point, the toxic masculinity, right? So, but Alana, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think my answers are kind of tied together, right? I mean, I think I see this again and again with criticisms of different shows, movies that I like, that they glamorize something. And I'm like, are we watching the same thing?
Yeah.
And there seems to be this gap, this nuance gap that I think is widening, where I'm like, I don't, it's not all one thing, right? He has to show how the mob life is seductive in order for you to understand why someone would enter it.
Yes.
But if anything, I mean, this show intentionally doesn't show a lot of Henry Hill's craziest, most amazing, crimes. I think, people are like, why didn't they show the Lufthansa heist? Lufthansa heist. And it's like, partially because he wasn't there, but I also think, he wasn't trying to do some crimes, some really compelling crime scene that makes it look cool. I mean, digging up a decomposing body and puking, that's what he's showing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there are other mob movies that are kind of taking the more action movie approach.
Mm-hmm.
So that ties to also the portrayal of women to me because, they are misogynistic. The women are treated like shit. And
yeah, you're so right.
Yeah,
it's not misogynistic to portray the truth that this was misogynistic. It doesn't mean that he's misogynistic for portraying a misogynistic environment.
Yeah, I don't think that we should, again, this is a nuanced take because I don't want movies and media that just only tell the stories of all the most horrible, because I do think that's a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
But what would we lose if this movie made these mobsters loving husbands? I mean, it's just not real, right? And Nicholas Pileggi called this movie a mob home movie.
Yeah.
He's like, this is more of a documentary. And another thing I'll say is Lorraine Bracco and her portrayal of the character and how it's written, she's not the perfect victim. I actually think she's given a lot of agency and nuance.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give me that Babe in the Woods routine, Karen. I love that prosecutor at the
yes.
Do you know that he's real?
That's the real guy,
Yes.
Ed McDonald. Yeah.
Yes.
And I love what he says to her. Is that your voice is on those wiretaps too, talking.
Exactly. On one
yeah.
hand, they have this horribly toxic and abusive relationship. And then she's like, bringing her mom over. Mom, look at my amazing imported shit from Italy. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're like, and I think that actually makes her this fully fleshed out character. That's really compelling, similar to Carmela.
And that's right. And I like Karen too, because she's an outsider. And then, listen, here's the problem. The mob is glamorous at first. It is, like, it's so ridiculous to me, this idea of like, oh, it's glamorizing the mob. Yeah. The guys that he's watching as a little boy through the blinds at the cab stand, who are the coolest guys in the vicinity. You know? They're awesome.
Especially compared to like his dad, who's working 11 jobs.
And who's violent and not loving. And these guys, here's the other thing about it. It's a lot about love. He goes to the cab stand. Those guys.
That's the team.
Right? Like, he goes to the cab stand and those guys love him.
Yeah.
They give him affection.
You know what it is? It's also about people who grow up where they have no societal respect. And he talks about like walking through the neighborhood and suddenly he's somebody, and how his mom gets her groceries carried home. I think that's a big appeal too, right?
Yes. And there's a movie, the movie I watched last night to prepare for this again, I hadn't seen in a long time. And I know it's a movie that Scorsese has said directly influenced this. It's called The Public Enemy from 1931. It's one of the first gangster movies, really, with Jimmy Cagney. It was made by Warner Brothers, and it's great. And it does the same thing of going from this guy's childhood up to the end. I won't say what it is. And the moment that strikes me is like in like 1908 or something, him and his little buddy are running around committing petty crimes, and he stops to knock a top hat off a rich guy and then keep running from the cops. And that to me like sums up the entire appeal of this lifestyle. Right?
Totally.
Like, knocking the top hat off the guy, you know? And that's what Henry sees. And his dad is an angry, violent guy, you know? He's trapped with all these people. And then he goes there. So we should get into what is this movie actually about?
Can you tell us a little bit about the real Henry Hill and your thoughts on how this movie accurately portrays him or not?
And can you start with Once Upon a Time?
Once upon a time in East New York, I think that's where it was, on the Brooklyn side, there was a mafia family called the Lucchese family. This is lending itself more to a fairy tale rendering than I would have thought. But and in this neighborhood was a capo named Paul Vario, who's the character based on him is depicted by Paul Sorvino in the movie.
May he rest.
May he rest. A very fine, sensitive, artistic man who is nothing like the character in the movie. You know, this very gruff, silent, sort of sinister figure. But he's the power in the neighborhood. Now, in real life, Paul Vario was also very important in the garbage hauling industry, which we've talked about. We did an episode on that. And ran his operations out of a junkyard, a trailer in a junkyard. But had a brother, Tuddy, who did run the cab stand that Henry sees. Henry was half Sicilian, half Irish. So he was always an associate hanger-on. I've heard it said in some tellings that he's more of a gopher than is depicted in the movie. He's certainly not as handsome as Ray Liotta, which I think...
That's for damn sure.
Yeah, right? Which
Who is actually, though?
I mean, he was a pretty interesting looking guy. But I've heard it said that he's more of a hanger-on than is depicted in the movie, which is a little interesting, right? That in his rendering, he's more of one of the guys.
Totally.
That's kind of interesting.
That makes sense.
Right? Like,
yeah. Everyone wants to be in the clique.
Well, why isn't he killed when he betrays Paulie by selling drugs? Like, you would think he would just immediately be whacked.
Well, so this is another interesting thing that happens right now. One of the great tensions, the movie is really like...
Sorry, I got ahead of us.
No. I mean, listen.
That confused me.
This is a movie about... It's a movie about finding a magic potion. That's what I think it is. He finds the magic potion in the cab stand, drinks it, and like every magic potion story, starts to wear off and there's bad consequences.
It's Alice in Wonderland.
It's Alice in Wonderland. He's going up and up and up. He meets the girl. Everything's great. That point where it changes is the Billy Bat scene. And then it's all downhill from there. Everything's downhill from there. But to answer that question with drugs, this is a constant tension the mafia had, which is nothing had bigger margins for money making than drugs, right? But it also had It was viewed as skeevy, dirty, and most importantly, the one that would carry 20, 30 years on these charges, right? And the fear was, Paul Cicero in the movie alludes to it. He says, Grubbs got, 30 years for talking to some guy who was selling junk. That was a real guy. And yeah, the fear was that these guys will turn over on drug charges, no problem. But the problem is the money is so good you can't resist. So this is part of the John Gotti story where he was financing drug deals, possibly killed the boss of the Gambino family to avoid punishment for that. So why does Henry not do it? Because he's lying. Here's the problem. When you make everyone so greedy and duplicitous and all that, that'll go on you too,
I think I've thought about this, and I think the real reason is not because it's seedy and that whole thing. I think it's just because of what you said.
Self-interest.
The likelihood of this person getting caught and them getting more time and then becoming a rat seems higher, right? When you're facing down 30 years.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
I think so. It's corrosive. And, listen, I'm so glad, Allie, you brought up toxic masculinity, because I have an elaborate theory on this. And if you'll forgive me, I'll get a little highfalutin for a second. There's a book, 2 books called Male Fantasies, and it's about a totally different subject. It's about these German militias after World War I that became the Nazi Party. It's really, really good books. And the point that this guy makes is part of the reason these guys were doing all this was so that they didn't have to go home to their wives.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't be domesticated. Like, oh my God, I'm going to be emasculated if I have to go home and like be with my wife and be soft and not a World War I warrior anymore. And I wonder, like, isn't this why these guys are doing all this stuff?
I didn't remember this, but remember when Ray, in the beginning of their relationship, and Karen's all worried about him getting caught. And he's like, the guys that get caught want to get caught. And then later, when he gets caught, it happens to be after their relationship is like completely fallen apart and he's moved out and has to move back in. And you see that look on her face, like she's like, oh yeah, he's doing this because he wants to avoid me.
Yeah.
And also it's like the episode of Sopranos in season 1 where Junior gets very upset because the rumor gets around town that he likes to go down on his girlfriend. And he's like, it's
a crisis. It's a serious issue.
It is a PR crisis.
Yeah.
Olivia Pope needed to get in there. And really, the whole thing is like, fellas, is it gay to eat pussy?
Right.
And like to them, it is.
Yeah, right. So that's exactly
makes
it.
No sense.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're getting at sort of the inherent conservatism of these guys, right? Like if you go to Italy, you look at the 'Ndrangheta or the Cosa Nostra there, who do these guys marry? They marry the sisters and daughters of other mobsters. So it's just this one big incestuous thing where there's no outside influence. Karen Hill is very distinct in this way to a degree, right? Where she sort of is an outsider. She's Jewish. She's from a middle-class, normal family. But that's not going to stop. Like, once he's secured the bag, so to speak, like there's that scene where he comes home late with Joe Pesci. The mother-in-law yells at him and he just walks away.
Oh my God.
I love that.
Like, nope, this is not how this deal works.
Yep.
And also I have a girlfriend, and multiple girlfriends.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what Allie was saying about these mobsters just sort of disassociating like all of their real feelings and I think part of why they avoid the women in their lives, or at least their wives, is because those relationships actually demand that they be in touch with that, right? Like they have to be present. They have their kids around. They have to be accountable. And so if they let that in there, I fear that they wouldn't be able to do their job.
There's also a part of omerta when they take it that's like, this is my family. And so even when they create that nuclear family that is the goal and the dream, they also have to know in the back of their heads that this can be abandoned and sacrificed at any moment. If it comes down to it, I will pick the guys.
Right.
And so there's this, and that's the brotherhood, but also
just kiss.
Yeah.
We've talked about this.
It's very lonely. It's very sad.
Yeah.
Well, because the other thing is we mentioned the love that Henry feels when he goes to the capstan and all that, right? But we know it's a lie. Everyone's lying to each other, right? Ray Liotta's lying to Paul Sorvino, who's his real father, basically, that he's selling drugs. He betrays him, no problem on that, right? Robert De Niro, who is the hitman, Jimmy Burke, and Joe Pesci would betray you for nothing. I mean, there's no loyalty.
Even how they kill Joe Pesci.
Yeah, right.
Is where they tell him he's going to become a made man, and he gets all dressed up, and then they shoot him head on, which is also
so he can't have an open casket funeral, right? So, I mean, these are the wages of. I mean, here's the other thing: Scorsese, we've said it before, is like a priest. He is this is about the wages of sin a lot. And I think he's drawn to these mob stories in part because there's always punishment, and what form that takes is different. But there's always punishment for sin in this, in the mob at least. And then interestingly, Wolf of Wall Street, there actually isn't punishment for these Wall Street guys. They sort of get away with it. So I think I know which one offends him more. I think, and it's the Wall Street one because. Goodfellas, it's sort of baked in. Henry Hill is in hell at the end of it, even though he sort of got away with it, quote unquote,
No, he hates his life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sucks, yeah.
It's horrible.
And in real life, I can tell you, it ended with him. I mean, he had a drug and alcohol problem, which is, depicted in the movie. It would end with him passing out on Venice Beach and Ray Liotta walking by him.
Oh my God.
Would be, on his morning walk or whatever. So that's where it gets you, Henry Hill's kids wrote a memoir that is extremely good.
Ooh, I would read that.
And they somehow turned out very normal, probably because of their mother. But they talk about basically where the movie ends is where that memoir sort of begins. And it's about living in these places like Kentucky with their father, who would get drunk the first night and tell everyone he was Henry Hill, a mobster. Like, this is in witness protection, And how do you live with a parent like that? We don't see much of the kids in this movie, but that's another interesting.
Except one scene where him and Karen are getting into a horrible fight. I think he hits her, I don't know, but then it just pans to the little girl.
That's
says it
really
all, really sad. Yeah, I love that. We've already talked a little bit about this, but we have to dial in our final act a little bit more about the bro movie element of this, just because it's a passion of mine. So do you guys remember in 2015, the New York Post had an iconic article? This was the headline: "Women are not capable of understanding Goodfellas." This broke the internet, this piece. It's literally one of the worst things ever written. But it gets to what I'm talking about. There was also a really funny tweet that went viral. Really sucks that every time you start dating a new guy, you're basically signing up to take a film theory 101 class of his making. You know how many guys named Matt have given me an hour-long lecture on Goodfellas? Now, unfortunately, I'm Matt.
I'm so glad you said that.
I'm Matt. But why? I mean, we can just say it's because of the mob and men love the mob, but women love the mob.
Right.
Women love this movie. I guess, given it kind of goes back to the glamorizing of it, but why do you think, I'm going to ask the token man in the room, this has such a stranglehold on male culture? This movie in particular.
I'll say this. I remember when Ray Liotta was being interviewed for like one of the anniversaries, like, why has this had such lasting impact? And he has that great voice. He said, because it's a good movie.
Fair.
I know that's kind of a lame answer, but it's really good. Let me tell you something. Just as a writer who's done like long form pieces where I have to move through time and all this stuff, this is one of the best structured movies you could ever watch.
100%, 100%.
It is so good how this movie is built out from a book, from a life story, right? Where we have these distinct, it's
amazing.
Really elegant and like clockwork and all that. So I think that actually is part of it. That is such a perfectly constructed movie, right? That I really believe this would appeal to anyone, basically.
Me
Even
too.
like, you're not from New York, you're not whatever, like, the great British director Michael Powell, you know, the Red Shoes and all these beautiful sort of fantastical movies, like he encouraged Scorsese making this, like, because he said, this is a beautiful movie, you know? And like, this is not a guy you think of as liking tough New York gangster stuff. So it's like, so that's my long-winded way of saying, I guess there's something so universal. Like I said, it's really a magic potion story. It's one of the oldest stories that there is. Guy finds something, it gives him powers. Powers come with consequences. Consequences catch up with him, right? It's like the oldest story there is, really, you know? And it just happens to be the mob, you know? But I will say, most of those old stories don't have the food, which I think we have to talk about a little bit.
We would be doing such a disservice.
I think we have to talk about the food being an aspect of this. In the same way you've zeroed in on the clothes. The food.
It's one of my favorite food movies of all time.
Blame me, what jumps out to you when I mention food and Goodfellas?
Garlic.
A lot of liquefying the pan. Yeah.
Cutting the garlic with a razor blade. Shaving it with a razor blade is one of the most brilliant, satisfying things I've ever seen. I'm not one of those people that likes watching TikToks of like soap. But of cutting
it's
soap.
ASMR.
Yeah. But like that to me is as close as I'll imbibe, where I'm like, oh, I could rewind and watch this 60 times. I love it's so tight and
liquefies
smooth.
In the pan.
Yeah. And the cameo of Marty Scorsese's beautiful mother in that scene where the guys come home that night and she's playing it as though she really genuinely does not know that they just did all of these horrible, violent things. Yeah. And she's just hanging out and like serving them this meal. It's just all of it is so textural and rich and feels really authentic. And like, I believe that that's what Martin Scorsese's house smelled like. And that's what his mom was doing. And this all just felt so real and tangible.
My understanding of that scene, which as I think about it, maybe that's the best scene in the movie, where they've killed Billy Batts in a violent rage. His body is in the trunk. They go to get a shovel at the house. And then my understanding of the scene is that Martin Scorsese's mother, who plays Joe Pesci's mother in it, there is no script. They just told them, you go, you do this, you know, improvise, which they did a lot. A lot of the script is based on improvisation first. And the mother reminds me of my grandmother, my one Italian grandmother. And I know those leftovers were hidden. I know those leftovers she was serving were really good. And the kind of leftovers where they're better after a night in the fridge.
Yes, because they needed to set 100%.
They're also always trying to feed you.
Oh, yeah. And then also just like the mob prison food culture that was of this era, which I don't think is even possible to exist anymore the way it used to, was so cool.
Yeah.
Because you could eat well while you're behind bars.
And that's true that not in this country. However, I will tell you, there was a similar reprise when the cartel boss Chapo Guzman was in prison. He would have these feasts brought in because he ran the prison to the point that he escaped from it. Yeah, even I'll give a simple one. When we see Paulie at a backyard barbecue, that sausage sandwich he's eating, that would hit the spot right now, I'll tell you, you know?
And don't you think that's part of sort of the allure of this lifestyle, right? You've got the diamonds, the drugs, the fashion,
solid
the
sandwich.
Food.
Yeah.
My favorite food, one, I love that the men all cook.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the final big sequences when Ray Liotta is like on his paranoid coke
the cutlets.
Trip. Yeah, the cutlets. Where he's talking about
just
this.
I'm
stirring.
Okay,
I'm stirring.
I'm obsessed. I know. It's so authentic to Italian culture that you're planning a meal and you have to cook the sauce all day. But he has to get in all of his side quests.
Right.
And he has his poor brother stir the sauce. That used to be my job too. My mom would be like, make sure you stir the sauce. And it's like 10 hours and you're just stirring. It can't stick. But that too. And it works, right? Like he does all of the side quests and then they have the meal at the end.
I mean, they have it late too, which it's like 10 p.m. dinner.
Yeah, but they pull it off.
They pull it off. They've sold a lot of cocaine that day. They're going to, I mean, listen, when that day, with the May 20th, 1980 sequence, I think I mangled that, but That's me driving around here. Then I got to go to Vaughn's and get the package.
100%.
You know.
So that's why I literally had that same thought where I was like, oh, this is me running errands. And that's because, and that was so intentional on Marty's part. Marty, my friend.
Marty.
And it's so good because you're like, at the end of the day, there's just so much like drudgery involved in this lifestyle.
A lot of errands.
Such a good point, right? Like
it isn't actually glamorous. How is that? How can people watch that sequence and say, oh.
I remember that Michael Imperioli said this in some interview talking about playing Christopher on The Sopranos, that it's not that these guys have legitimate jobs or anything, but they have to like, and work isn't quite the right word, but they have to do a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I'm a mobster now and that's it. I've made it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do like the worst part of that morning to me, until Henry gets arrested by the police at the end, is he goes to De Niro's house with the silencers for the guns.
Yep.
And they don't fit, and he's yelling at him in a bathrobe on the doorstep. It's like, this sucks, you know?
Yeah. It's like your shitty boss.
Yeah.
You
What
know?
the fuck is this? I can't use this shit. Stop that. Your mind's turning to mush.
So good.
Yeah. That's a great point too, right? And like, yeah, just this
You're still having to cook your meal. You know, you're trying to cook the meal for the family.
And you get all the thing and you can't enjoy it. Like buying that pink car. Like,
oh God,
death
I love
sentence.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
You can't have any fun with what you earned.
So this is another great point. Obviously, the hinge of the third act is the Lufthansa heist occurs, which I asked my father about this because he remembers it at the time growing up in Queens, you know. And it was a big deal, as one would imagine, the airport being their ATM, right, JFK. But we don't see the heist, as you say. Now, Martin Scorsese could have made it a set piece.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's a very interesting choice.
But Henry wasn't there, so we don't see it.
I also think he just didn't want to see it because it's badass.
I think so. Right. Yeah.
And wasn't he in Boston during this time?
So this is an interesting thing. We could do a whole episode and should do a whole episode on a scam that doesn't even enter into the movie, aside from one stray reference, which is point shaving.
Yes.
And the Henry Hill scam on, I think it was BU. And I think another school was in there too. It's been a little while since I thought about it. But I don't know the relevance of gambling in professional sports today. I don't know if that would hit. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. So maybe we'll put that on the back burner. But that's going on in the background.
Also, another one of his great glamorous crimes, if you ask me, was taking the Estee Lauder magnate out for drinks and having her house raided for $1 million of stuff. But it's like, they could have included that and they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's partially because this isn't a film about that. It's a film about digging up a dead body that's decomposed.
It's right. Like you have to hone. I mean, any adaptation has to hone what we're going to actually talk about in here. There's a million directions you could have gone in. I mean, there have been books written about these characters since then, real books, which claim, among other things, the Paul Sorvino character was fucking Karen.
Yeah,
so,
that's
bombshell.
I think that's kind of hinted at.
Maybe.
Because he says, I know how to talk to her.
Could be. You know, it's like, so that was happening, that Henry Hill, like I said, was more of a gopher, that, he was an alcoholic from way earlier. And that was part of the story too. That is a little, not so much in there, you know. So things like that, which, who knows, man. But yeah, you can't put everything in a movie. It has to be, Scorsese's trying to make a point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Allie, something else you mentioned to us was just sort of the queer obsession with the show. I mean, the movie.
I feel like I've always been very interested in the relationship between the toxic masculinity, viewing things through a queer lens, the idea of like vulnerability in relationships and, sex and in intimacy in all of its forms, and the way that it's met with such resistance within this like specific group of guys. And it almost it's one of those things where it almost circles all the way back around, like same as The Sopranos earlier, where it's like they're posturing so hard as straight that they become gay.
Exactly.
Like, it's like it goes back around, and they're not trying to, but what they're doing is so gay.
Mm-hmm.
True.
All of it. Being this secret club where everyone has to take a secret oath.
Oh
And,
my God.
and everyone gets a little job title.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as being in a fraternity, which is also incredibly homoerotic.
Right.
Mhm.
Like all of it. It's like, and I think that people get into frats. I think people join the mob. It's like all of these things that they're like, this is the straightest thing I could be. But you are with a group of guys. There are no women around. You guys are dancing and laughing and kissing each other on the cheeks for a second too long.
Mm-hmm.
And, just be honest.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Right.
It's like, back in the ancient times, the Romans and the Greeks were all doing this too, but they were fucking.
Yeah.
And they were better for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and so I guess that's basically my call to action. I think that everyone that is in a mob, I think that everyone that is in a fraternity should all.
And these are still Romans. You know?
You know, Brokeback Mountain, we need the mobster version of that.
Like,
oh man.
You know?
Such repression. It's like, just do it. And
the wheels are turning.
I understand being scared. But to me, it's just like, this is a self-contained community of this one thing, like masculinity that you all adore. So why not take it as far as it can go, boys?
Yeah,
Am I crazy?
No, and listen, this brings up the specter of obviously there have been gay men in the mob.
Yes.
That has happened. And it is interesting to see how they treat this, right? Because if you're actually gay, it's sort of pointing out how gay everything else is that they're doing, right?
Yeah. Like, and I don't mean to sound like reductive or anything, but it does feel that way to me when I watch it, where I'm like, all of this as a gay person, I'm like, this is gay.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is gay, but you are thinking that you're being so straight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's this hostility to women on the one hand, right? Where they have to be purged from it. But then what do you call this society where the intimacy is all between men?
Yeah.
There's one of the funniest little things in the movie to me is De Niro has gotten the phone call that Joe Pesci has died and knocks over the payphone and is weeping.
Yes.
And this is we've never seen him like this. And Ray Liotta comes out, he tells him what happened, and they're standing apart from each other, and he is trying to find a way to comfort him, and he sort of hesitantly puts his hand out to pat him on the back a little
Fellas,
bit.
is it gay to give your friend a hug
Like,
when
when
someone
your friend dies?
Can I do that? He's not even sure. And also, this is the biggest psychopath in the movie,
Right.
So it's funny to see him upset about anything, and he's crying.
Yeah.
He is weeping,
Yeah.
There have been, as I said, real members of the mafia who had, were gay or had sexual relations with men, more specifically. And how do they deal with it? They deal with it not well. I believe the one that is, it's not great.
It's not well.
I think John D'Amato was his name. He was an underboss, and it was rumored that he was going to sex clubs with a girlfriend and he was bisexual, that he was engaging in sex, and he was murdered for it. Now it may have been partially used as a pretext to make that murder happen, right? And then the flip side is there was a car thief named Vito Arena who was hooked up with the Roy DeMeo crew, very violent, very scary group of guys. And he was more or less openly gay on the other hand, and there was not much they could do about it because he was so scary.
Yeah.
So, and then later became a snitch, went into witness protection with his boyfriend, and was killed robbing a liquor store in Arkansas or something. That could be its own movie, and I would like to see that movie. But, the flip side, I will say, is in Italy now, we have had instances of gay mobsters being open about it. And in one case, the father was like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's the 2000s, baby. Let's.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder too, if part of it, I thought of this when you were talking about why men like mob movies, right? And just from having covered for a long time, different male subcultures, some toxic, some not. It seems to be very compelling, the idea of being an outsider that gains acceptance or gains respect, which is what the mob is, right? These people coming from Italy, being cast aside, and then finding a way to achieve the American dream. Same thing with, the lone cowboy. So whether or not that's actually true in every case, I can see that also being part of the queer story, right? So there are those kind of, I'm getting too deep with it.
No, listen.
But I do think that's attractive, right? You're sort of like an outcast. How do I gain power?
Yeah.
Well,
right?
And one of the last shots of the movie is this weird shot of Joe Pesci firing the gun into the camera.
Mm-hmm.
This is taken from a silent movie, The Great Train Robbery from like 1912, where one of the outlaws does that to the camera. So I think he's saying that this is a story that's as old as can be,
And I think that's why I don't think if Goodfellas was about the Joe Pesci character, it's not as interesting. They picked the outsider within the group of outsiders, right? The fact that he's half Irish, he can never become a made man. And I think that's part of why you're so on the journey.
Oh, yeah. Huge chip on his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way either. And also the reason it can't be a movie about the Robert De Niro character, because he is so sinister, we just wouldn't empathize with him at all, right? He's so violent and scary,
Yeah, I think that gets back to the glamour thing. I think there's a difference between empathizing with characters and that meaning that they're being glamorized.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, Succession is a great example. I mean, the Succession is in the mold of The Godfather, in a lot of ways. I think Kendall Roy is Michael Corleone, basically, right? But only I actually hate them more than I do the Corleones, you know? I mean, these are the people destroying our world now, But to that point, not to get political, I
hate when you do that.
I know. When I think of someone from the outer boroughs of New York, specifically Queens, craving respect, not getting it at home, looking to outside influences, outside power brokers to give that respect, having a bottomless hole inside that cannot be filled by any accumulation, wealth, power. I think of the New York Mets, No,
you think of your co-host.
I think of you. I think of our current president, who I call him the Cheeto in chief. That's just me.
Only
I came up with that. But no, like we are currently led by a guy who basically is Henry Hill. Only, again, not as handsome. I mean,
don't insult Henry Hill like that.
That is, what? In fairness to Henry Hill, he never did January 6th. This is.
Please.
I also think Donald Trump wishes he was played by Ray Liotta.
That's right. I think that's it, right? Like that is the thing. And he's more the Maurice Wig guy.
That's yes. Yes.
We should mention briefly, I think, because that's such a great performance. And it's one of the only times we see any conscience in the movie a little bit, where this bookie, this degenerate gambler who owns the wig store, he's in on the heist. He keeps annoying the wrong guy to annoy for his end of the money. And Henry knows Henry's his friend, and he's trying to keep him from getting killed, and he can't do it. And there's nothing to be done about it, It's just the way this goes.
That was the one time when I'm watching and I'm like, please don't kill him. Yeah. I don't know. I know he's really annoying, but I just love that character, and he's nice to his wife. They have that's also another thing, right? How much does he tell his wife? Another reason why
they do a great job making you empathize with Maury, right? For some reason. I don't even know why and how exactly, But
I think it's also just that he's such a good actor.
He's great in it. This guy, Chuck Lowe, who, again, I don't think was a professional actor, and they had to do this,
Wow.
But anyway, yeah.
Well, any final words? We said we were great at endings.
I love it.
Yeah. I think we want to take it out with you and your brilliance.
You want to take me out?
No, I want to take out the episode.
Then that's good.
How much do you think Allie tells her wife?
No, I don't want to kill you. I want you to
slip up. I got it.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not going into the hallway with you.
Wait, just go in the Headgum bathroom.
Boom. No, I want you to end with a plea to maybe people, maybe women, maybe queer people who haven't seen Goodfellas, for some reason. There's not one in the room.
And then I'll do one for straight white men after.
Okay.
That was a joke.
Next time you
There's not a straight white man on this planet
that hasn't seen
that
Goodfellas.
hasn't seen Goodfellas.
But if there is, we're
Let
gonna
us know
find
right
them.
in.
Yeah.
This is it's the best movie. It's a 5 stars. It's a perfect film. You're going to love it. Watch it at Christmas with your parents. That's usually what I do.
You hit upon a very important point. Goodfellas, look, I don't want to be one of the, Die Hard's a Christmas movie. I don't want to be one of those.
It is, though.
But it is.
It is. If a movie has really good food and multicolored lights in any scene, it is therefore a Christmas movie.
Goodfellas is a Christmas movie. Has one of the great Christmas scenes of, bring it back. I don't care where you bought it. I want you to bring it back.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's in my mother's name, you know?
Yeah. Oh my
That's
God.
so good.
Yeah. So it's so worth your time. I love it. I think that I don't know. I think that movies are for everybody. And I kind of I disagree with this thing of like, that's a girl movie, that's a boy movie, like the gendering and the binary of it.
Yeah.
And of, this, it's for all. And just as all men should see Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, I think all people should also see Goodfellas.
Yeah. And, we'll start to wrap up here by saying, but that toxic masculinity, I think that is a mainstay as a concern of Martin Scorsese. It gets even accentuated more in The Irishman, which is really about guys who are not in touch with their feelings. That's really what the whole movie's
that's
about.
what it's about. Yeah. And that's why I also think that it's not misogynist of him to portray these misogynists, because I feel like there's this lens of him saying that this is bad. It's not endorsing the behavior by depicting it.
Yeah.
It's just being honest.
Yeah. If you watch that movie and think Marty wants you
and also
to live the life,
guy made
you're
Age of
crazy.
Innocence.
It's true.
Okay? Made Edith Wharton. Or as Christopher Moltisanti says, seeing Martin Scorsese, Kundun, I liked it. Dalai Lama.
Incredible. Thank you so much for joining us for the pop culture episodes. Keep those numbers up for my eps, guys. But next week, Dan's going to be back.
I will be moving out of the cuck seat, back into I'm going to call it the Weiger Alley seat.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's so nice.
You're welcome. That Nick Weiger character, I don't know. I'm sharing a seat with this fella. Jeez,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So get researching, Dan.
Yeah, I got to get back to work.
And we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.